Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service.
Here we are again at the end of a rainbow.
Hip-hop has been ripe with New York lore since the genesis of the art form. Albums like Illmatic, The Cold Vein, are two of many shining examples of albums that encapsulate New York City life from their own unique perspectives. King Vision Ultra's Shook World is the latest album to accomplish this feat, building a world that captures the raw grit and rich history of the city like no other, embodying the spirit of collective action through the deep guest list of a variety of New York artists and the foundational collaboration with post-punk band Algiers' latest album, Shook. GENG PTP, aka King Vision Ultra, is a man of many hats, founder of the revered PTP collective, and creator of this dense epic of an album, Shook World, who joined the show to deep dive into its creation in the latest installment of the Album Alchemy series. You don't want to miss this. The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth album and song reviews, as well as artist interviews and general rap commentary sprinkled in between on all of what the mainstream and underground rap scenes have to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. How's it going, gang?
It goes swell. It goes swell. Spring is upon us out here in New York City. So still gotta have your layers, but the sun is out earlier. I wake up at like 6 in the morning usually, so it's like it's actually light out.
Mm-hmm.
Not like you want to crawl back in. Well, sometimes you still want to crawl back into bed, but it's going forward.
Yeah, we got daylight savings here in Toronto. That's been a great time. I
Word.
usually hate it, but now I get it. The sunlight's been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
For real.
You miss it when it's not around,
100%. Yeah, so we're talking about Shook World today, and I have to say, out of all the records that I've covered in this new Album Alchemy series, and those technically a mixtape, Shook World is the one that I feel after listening to it has left me with the most questions.
Wow.
And maybe something I shouldn't really admit, but given the fact that, this is my role as a host of a show like this, but this was a daunting conversation to prepare for. Like, I have to say, just because there's like so many places we could take this conversation, so many places we can focus on and have like 3 hours of content. And I think that just speaks to how dense and meaty this project really is. So just have to say that right up front. And I think that's been evidenced by the response that's been like marvelous, I have to say.
Appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's I've had a couple lengthy conversations around it, and none of them have been the same, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
So I look forward to this one. And also, I mean, it's an album. It's an album. Just it pays homage. It honors the mixtape format. But you're right to call it an album. It's not a mixtape in the way that term has become in the newfangled sense.
Okay, nice. And yeah, so starting with like that foundational understanding here, the album Shook World, it's hosted by Algiers and related to Algiers' latest record, Shook, that dropped, I believe, a month after Shook World did. So I think it dropped end of February, Shook did. And so let's start there. Like, how was this album conceived? And particularly, I want to understand, like, what in particular about this specific Algiers record spoke to you and kind of inspired the whole creation of Shook World based off of it?
Word. The collaboration really began with them, approaching me, having Dave spent some time, like they revealed that they known some shit that I've done, you know what I'm saying, whether it be in like the previous work with Amani or even Pain of Mind, my first album,
right,
and like my slowness mixes, like the Portishead joint and the other joints that are out there in the world. And they were just like, yo, we really want to see if you like our album, our upcoming album, which was Shook, can we send it to you? And if you like it, would you be willing to like make something out of the parts of it, whatever parts you like? And I was like, cool. So like the press release, I think, said like it was originally intended to be like a digital mix or whatever. Like they were basically like people on that side, not necessarily just Algiers, but more so the folks on I guess their team or whatever, uh meaning like Matador and whatnot. I think we're expecting like something to like live on SoundCloud, like a mix, like
Mm-hmm.
some soundscape mix. I don't, but they made it very clear that like I could do whatever the fuck I wanted and to add voices from my own side of things, to do whatever basically. So I just basically spent a lot of time listening to Shook in preparation. Immediately I really, really enjoyed what I was hearing, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see. Oh, and it was kind of like I saw where they were going with it, and I'm like, oh, this is ill because it's like Big Rube is like the
Yeah.
narrator on their album, and then you got Woods and Backwash,
Backwash. Yeah.
right? On one joint, you got members of Morning Black Star, you got members of Boy Harsher, you got DeForest Brown, you know what I'm saying? Like
Zach
this
De La
Patrick
Roca.
Shiroshi, Zach De La Roca, right? You got like a smattering of like different personnel, friends, collaborators, etc., kind of mixed in and out. And it Latoya Kent, you know what I mean? So it was just like, all right, I see what y'all doing. Like, and there was a messaging there that was clear, but also the sonics of it was something that was really intriguing for me, and kind of something that I wanted to ping pong with my own rendition and sort of usage of their stems. And it kind of gave me this like, I think it gave me this very, I don't know, cold is not the word necessarily, but there were like little things that they were doing like originally, or right there on the intro. And we mentioned this in the Bandcamp conversation, but there's that moment where you hear the train coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and mind you, they're from Atlanta, so but members have had spent time in living in New York. I mean, one of the members does live in Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like all these like little like recordings and pieces of their sort of like sprawling world. And this one train situation happens, this little train moment happens, and then it goes into this like breakbeat, that this drum beat that sort of sounds exactly, or sounds like it's referencing to me like Wild Style, the old hip hop film.
Mm-hmm.
And thus really that order of things references Illmatic, the intro to Illmatic, Nas's first album. So I was like, okay, I see what y'all doing here. Cool. I think like there's a very like, I don't, damn, you know what? Like I have a word that's very used and I don't want to use that word. But there's like this very like future shock kind of like element to their Shook. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? It's a very like, there's bleakness to it. There's like
Yeah.
so that's why I was kind of leaning towards cold, but there's also like a hopefulness. So those are the things that I kind of took into then making, into approaching my own sort of like sound shaping, and just like also just figuring out like what elements, like listening to like what elements I could hear as a digger, you know what I'm saying? As someone who like listens for like little doop, like little sound candy, little ear candy. And I'm like, okay, let me lift that. Oh, I hear like and I just knowing that you have control over all this because they're sending me the songs broken down to stems. And I'm just like, okay, I have like full kind of agency to roll around with all this and like play around with it. So yeah, I think the hopefulness, the the sort of like real modern day terror, all sort of communicated, or all being communicated alongside with that element of collaboration on their Shook, was certainly something that I wanted to do my own version of when approaching Shook World.
I love the way you put that. Yeah, no, I find the way that they use like the just the gospel like vocal lines or
Mm.
reminiscent of gospel kind of gives that like haunting slash dark feeling, and I feel like that definitely fit the kind of mood. I like what you said. Would you say future shock or modern
Yeah, it's
day
a future
terror?
shock.
Like
Yeah.
that, I love that. Like the
Right.
organs too. Like it just it's a
Mm.
really chilling type of atmosphere that Shook creates that I think translated so well to what you've done, in not only on this record but in the past. It's not like something foreign to you.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that kind of bleak, that kind of real life reality shock is something you've worked with really well.
Word. I appreciate, yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate, you acknowledging that from as like something that's not just present on this work. And it shows that you've been listening, you know what I mean? So I appreciate you taking the time to even tap in, you know what I mean?
Oh no, we're man, I love what you're doing, and I think you something you said on the that Bandcamp interview that you actually referenced earlier, that you did with Algiers. You said that
Mhm.
you hoped listeners could listen to both Shook and Shook World and see that the two albums, and this is your quote, two albums are holding hands under the table. So outside of the technical aspect of, as you described, using the stems from Shook to create parts of Shook World, could you elaborate on how exactly these two albums speak to each other, connect to each other?
Yeah, I think thematically there's plenty of intersection. There's plenty of intersect. There's plenty of crossover. Yeah, beyond like the shared sonic moments, right? Elements. There's the collaborative spirit. There's that harkening back or pointing back to, you know, cool, we could be solo out here, but we could also like we're better as a village. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's kind of like the in most simplest, clear cut, shortest terms. That would be my succinct answer to that. You know what I mean? Where, there's power in numbers.
Yeah, I think the collectivist mindset, that's something that you spoke about again in past interviews, and then it kind of just appears a lot in your art. I think that's,
PTP
yeah,
and the whole PTP shit. Like
yeah,
that's literally what it is, you know?
yeah. No, I love that. And how much of the sound of this album was exactly sourced from Shook? Like versus what I'm asking basically is like, I know you can't really give a percentage. I'm not asking for that, but does like for example every song include an element of Shook, or was because I recognize certain ones for sure, and then others you had the stems. Like I bet I can't even tell half the time.
Right, right. It's a good question. I mean, I would say, honestly, easiest way is like a ballpark percentage for me is like maybe like 80% or like somewhere between 70 to 80, 85, right? Basically where it's like
75 to 80 like in are sourced from that.
not well, okay. I would say 70 to 85% of the songs on Shook World
Okay,
have
okay,
one or two sounds from Shook.
okay, that
So
makes
it's
sense.
not like I'm taking every stem and, you know, remixing them or repurposing them in
Hmm.
that way. It's more like I'm making a whole joint out of like one sound that was from this one song over off of Shook, or two sounds or whatever, you know what I mean? And generally a lot of the times I'm adding my own percussion, rhythm section, so to speak, my drums and certain bass sounds, certain sound effects. And also like when I'm taking their sounds, like I'm not taking them bare, like I'm not manipulating them. I wouldn't just take them and in their in their untouched state or whatever. I would everything gets flipped and kind of like thrown through the KVU teleportation device or whatever, you know what I mean? Like the blender, you know what I'm saying? Like my little blender and whatnot. And I want to make a single sound, something that lasts a few seconds, that appears in the background of a song on Shook to be the main fanfaric element, to be the whole thing, to be this long sprawling and winding and curling and twisting behemoth of sound or wall of sound or just some frontal element in Shook World. That happens a couple times. Like Please Leave is like I think one stem. I mean, like that whole good Doom guitar situation.
Mm.
I made that. It's like an acoustic. It's like a strumming that's like found on one of the other songs on Shook. And I was just like, I could break this and make these into like long notes and yada yada yada. So it's a lot of like processing on the before it turns into like anything. It's me like making it, texturizing things and making that fall into like my own realm of sound and, realm of sonics, you know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, and like another quote I got from a past conversation I was with Clang. You said you wanted the listener to know that the loop spent time in my world. Like we had a conversation and are changed because of it. I love that.
Damn, I didn't I
That's a
forgot I said
fucking
that
that's a
word.
fucking bar. Yeah, no, I love that because you were speaking, I think, in that like the context about that is that you were speaking about how, like it's not all about like how much to the degree that you like manipulated something. It's just that you did something with it. Like you made it into your KVU world. And as
Right,
you kind of just
translating into like translating into that language from Algiers, you know what I'm saying?
hmm. And
Mhm.
I on this topic of kind of like the samples that you've used, not like really focusing on the stems from Shook. I have
Mm.
a Patreon question from a New Yorker, a very avid New Yorker.
Mm.
So he had a question, so I can't even validate that this is true, but he said he feels like there's a source material palette here that's very '06 to '09, which is in my mind the last time New York was not in a hyper gentrification state while still being this absurdist post 9/11 landscape. Was that intentional or nah?
Wow. I think I know who asked
Oh,
that
that's
too.
Fatmantomb, by the way.
Yeah, I
Shout out
know.
Fatmantomb.
Shout out to my man's. I think part of that was intentional because what I did want to do with the whole thing was allude to these different so-called, we'll call them eras, or some people call them generations, moments, movements in what was representative of what was the language of New York City, at various times. So, you do have, I mean, I was looking at it from my collaborators, right? From the people who like are my chosen family, right?
Hmm.
I have folks who are like my senior by a few years, people who I looked up to when I was just starting music, you know what I'm saying? Like a Big Just,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Martin and Roberts been outside way long, for a few years longer than I have. Same thing with Latasha. Latasha is people like Mike Ladd and like APC, and you know is in that school or that class of the folks who were doing this who were doing poetry and like bending words and that. So that's like a thing right there, and that alludes to like a moment in my, and also in just like this so-called underground history where it's like, okay, like we're going to the Near Rican Poets Cafe, we're going to the Wetlands, we're going to Tramps and whatever. Like I still have footage and obviously like a shoebox full of cassettes from that capture elements, little bits of that era. At the same time, you know, my man Boog, who's got the Harlem Boog interlude, the was it
2010 interlude.
2010 interlude,
Yeah.
right? That song is from 2010. We did that shit, and
Oh
that was
wow.
like a different life of mine. We were all living a different life, you know what I'm saying? A lot of the shit, I mean, the shit that he's saying on there is true, like to certain degrees at least. And it's a different experience than say what you're hearing, anyone else say, really. Anyone else it's a different experience. It's shared, it's understood, but it's a different experience than what you're getting from, say, like Masai or Nakama or Amani or what, you know what I mean? Like, because Boog is my age. We came up, like, I met him in like junior high school. So, like, we've been family for a long time now, decades, you know what I'm saying? And that's like, we were really active, really started to get active in the 2000s, and that's where you get that Ron Browse moment, that's where you get the Light Feet moment,
Love that shit.
the Showtime, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, like a lot of people really fuck with that. People really been fuck I mean, people fuck with a few things, but there is that like Showtime moment that leads into Please Leave, and it's just that thing of like, yeah, that's that mid 2000s, that's when I was doing stuff with Dipset, you know what I'm saying? That's when I started hustling, and you know what I mean? I was in the street and whatnot and yada, yada, yada. You know what I mean? I was just like, all right, well, I'm gonna make this shit fresh out of college, and do I need a job or not? You know what I'm saying? And was really trying to like figure out some shit in my own personal life. So that certainly had to be alluded to because it was post 9/11. It was this like turning point for the city. And a lot of people refer to that shit, me included sometimes, as like a dark ages in like
Right.
music, you know what I mean? Or like especially like
100%.
technology is going crazy, ringtones, yada yada yada, you know what I mean? So, but we did have like there were a lot of moments still, regardless, that kept us going, so to speak, whether it be a Styles P series of mixtapes, whether it be, the Dipset shit, whether it be, whatever you were tapping in with, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you did fuck with snap music or if you did fuck with dance music, chicken noodle soup or whatever, like Little Mama and all that, like, fine. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
That's all these are all things that were happening then. But for me, it was about like reflecting the shit that I was actually like the shit that speaks true to my experience
Yeah.
and my understanding of the history of this land as I've been walking through it. You know what I'm saying? And as also like myself and my collaborators have been walking through it. Like there's jazz moments too, you know what I'm saying? Obviously Matana is on there, blowing crazy, you know what I mean? And like so there's all this like, but that's also like the avant-garde, like the downtown avant-garde and whatnot. Like there's all of that like being pointed at too. And obviously we cut to modern day, so to speak, with like, the folks who I'm a bit older than, you know what I mean? Like the Nakamas, the Des Days, the Amanis, et cetera, you know what I'm saying? So I wanted to paint that lineage. And furthermore, like using the train as that sort of like backbone,
Yeah.
narrative backbone. It's like you're taking a trip, like a multitude of trips. It's
Different
not just
places and
like,
time, different places and time. Yeah.
yeah, it's not just about boroughs. It's not just about like location, so to speak, as a physical or geographical on a geographical sense. It's about like, yeah, time and what time even means. That's that Jean Grey sample on Trappings. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, well, like this album was also a question to that. Because like we're all told, we're all like told that we're in competition with like time. Like there's not a time in a day.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how much do you do in your day versus how much do I do in my day? Time, in a lot of sense, in this like state that we live in and live under, like the system, and I mean like capitalism and all that, like is always it's a tool like anything else that's like logistic and like binary in terms of like its numbering.
Hmm.
I think and arbitrary, and we've talked about this in the previous episode when I was on in terms of like number ratings. I
Yeah.
think, time is a weapon that or is oftentimes weaponized against the people in order to divide and create that sort of like friction, like, oh wait, like that self-comparison slash self-sabotage. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? Or like, just the opposition, like, okay, like you're more so-called productive than I am. All right, well,
Right.
I gotta outdo them somehow, yada yada yada. Like, you know what I mean? So it speaks to all that. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question, I mean, I think I did. But
Yeah,
yeah,
you did. You did.
yeah.
I like also that there's a connection because that idea of like the way you kind of speak to time on this album
Mm,
is not exactly the same, but it's kind of a ssimilar thought or feeling I had from Unknown Infinite in particular. I
mm.
remember when I wrote that, like I think it may be the 2 year and 1 year, 2 year anniversary of it.
I think it was a
I
one
re
year.
It was 1 year. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
being like there's something so surreal about how I kind of feel lost in confused is the wrong word, but just like time doesn't feel as rigid. Like I don't really know what area or what time period I'm in, and it's a lot to do with what Amani's saying and a lot to do with like kind of the sampling and the way that you did it. It just feels like everything's kind of like dissolving in front of me. It's like a lucid
Word.
dream, I
Okay.
think is the way I put it. And I feel like that is
Mm.
a just maybe a general kind of style you like to explore in a lot of your music.
Yeah, yeah. I think like I like to blur, like even the beginnings and endings of songs.
Yeah.
Because there's everything kind of comes in and things coming out.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I like to make sure you're just sitting and kind of forget about what the clock is saying. That's
Exactly.
just,
I love that. I love that.
you know, that was my
Um,
balloon mind state experience. To shout out to De La. You know what I mean? That's what I got from that. Listening to that on cassette and being like, yo, where, like, what am I listening to right now? Like, what song is this? I'm not, you know what I mean? You're on the
mhm.
track list on the back of the
Yeah.
cassette. You're like, where am I? You know what I mean? Like shit like that just be bugging me out. Like I love that shit. Like
Hmm.
blowout comb, another great and another album that I feel like I fell in love with even more later on is that's another one that does that to me. It has those points of just like continuous, the
Yeah.
sequencing is just
Hmm. Exactly. No, I
chef's
love it.
kiss. Yeah.
And so you talked about, like, you've talked about lineage a lot just in this conversation. It's something that
Mm,
comes up a lot in a lot of the themes that are on this record. And so, like, the person speaking at the end of this album like caps it off really interestingly, in my opinion. Like, in a nutshell, they're like, I still love this place. I don't want to leave. Stop yelling at me and trying to like tell me otherwise. Like, you're not from here, whatever, all that stuff. I feel
right.
it's a really notable way to end the album just because it follows, yeah, it follows about an hour of music that speaks to the realities of living in New York, like for better or for worse, and
Mhm.
some of the challenges that come with that. What would you say is like the thesis or like central message that you're hoping to communicate, particularly as it relates to your sentiments towards New York on this album?
The whole good neighbor thing that I stated in the I guess the press release, so to speak, and the album description or whatever, like it's about being a good neighbor. It's like, you know, if you're not if you're not dedicated or if you're not like invested in sharing the space and like knowing, sort of understanding, like wanting to understand like what has been that history, but not just like a book read history, because that can only give you but so much. Like you have to actually have like a lived experience in order to start even beginning to speak on something, that pertains to that, you know, the laws of that land, so to speak,
Hmm.
or like the ways of that living. I mean, it's been decades now, but it's been even more than that. But like, especially like a post 9/11 New York, right?
Yeah.
These quality of life laws got revved up, you know, buildings got bought out, people left because of 9/11, you know what I'm saying? Because of like the fear of shit happening, shit going down or whatever. And just whatever, Landstar getting bought up by like these developers or whatnot.
Hmm.
Except like those those spaces weren't being finished because they weren't like people weren't going in. People couldn't afford, or not enough people were buying up to live in those spaces over the pandemic, like the beginning of the pandemic and quarantine, right? You spend time, you're watching YouTube or whatnot, and you find yourself kind of like I'm with I've been living with my partner for years now. So she was watching like something on YouTube, like an apartment tour or some shit. And then we would just gawk at some of the prices that people were talking about, like, oh,
Yeah.
this is a deal. And we're like, what?
Yeah.
Are you? And like that's the environment out there. Like that's what people are paying. Like we've had that forever now. It's just like, damn, like you just see every few years you see like that wave of like cost of living go up, so to speak. More people come in here, a lot of like old money mixing with new money
Hmm.
happening. People come here with some dream to be with many dreams, right? A lot of the time those people end up leaving after a few years, or after they're done with school or whatever the case is. And the thing is, that slime, that like residual like mess that they've created in staying here and not kind of like abiding by like and not honoring the people who were there beforehand and there presently and who are going to be there, because one, they don't want to leave because they've literally, made a life here
Hmm.
and gotten through some shit. And you know what I mean? Like you're not like, or B, they just, there's no like this, they don't have the gas money. You know what I'm saying? Like for whatever reason, they don't have the resources to get the fuck out if they wanted to,
Yeah.
even if they wanted to. So it's like you're coming here. I don't feel like it anymore. I'm out. It's just so like, well, yo, be the fuck out then, please. But like, don't tell your peoples to come here either. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's
Hmm.
kind of also what it is too. It's just like, yo, like, that's the issue with gentrification. Like, people come in with no acknowledgement of what they're stepping into and what they're stepping into does to that environment. Because then you're having, 10 of those people on every block. So now you have a whole neighborhood turning into something different. You have a whole neighborhood, it's not just Starbucks and Walmart we got to worry about, opening up in like neighborhoods that were 10 years before very much, pushed to the pushed to the margins or pushed outside of the margins and not given resources. You know what I'm saying? We're otherized basically. We're like, oh, like this is where people go to get forgot to be forgotten.
Yeah.
Like we serve these communities. Like it's all the other businesses that are made through that privilege and access and privilege of having access to then like, oh, I'm gonna, this is the little, I mean, I'm vegan and all that, but like, there's an abundance of like very expensive like vegan coffee shops or like bakeries and things that like popped up in various neighborhoods, and like you see who's working there, you see who owns the spots, and it's just like, well, damn, like these vloggers and these apartment tours and whatnot, they're like all subjects of this accelerated caustic environment that has plagued New York and other big cities or other cities, in terms of like this like rapid development, aka it's gentrification, right? So it's just
Hmm.
like, okay, like the price is moving up faster than the money is being made for most people, at least. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And these
Yeah.
are the folks who having folks come in with like tech jobs that they don't even need to go to work. They don't even need to leave home, or they're YouTubers, and you know what I'm saying? So it's all like it's like it's like you coming in with like monopoly money. You coming in like printing your own bread. You know what I mean? Like you literally have made your own sort of like, it's a different type of like economy that you're introducing to this neighborhood that a lot of that didn't ask for that first and foremost. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but you're buying the shit out because you have, excesses.
Yeah.
So, I think that's what it speaks to. That's why the song is called, Please Leave.
Please
That's why you
leave.
hear those elements. Because that's not just the only sentiment, but it's like that exact moment and like the voices and the complaints of the people you hear in those moments, like that's the shit that like that shit happens. Like that wasn't like acted out. That's like literally just me going, letting the YouTube algorithm take me to places I don't want to ever like,
Hmm.
what I mean, really experience again, as far as like, I don't need, watching or whatever, but at the same time, like to me, it was like the clearest example of like a clearest few examples of like what this is and what that environment sort of represents as far as like mentality and, behaviors and whatnot. Just foulness, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like I think there's one part of that song where it's a girl being like, "Oh, the subway is just so disgusting." And it's like kind of what you said, it's like a lot of areas where they were underserved generally, people with money come in and then they're complaining about shit and acting entitled. It's like, well, I mean, that's just what is your problem here? Like, I don't it just doesn't it's just you came here. Why are you even here in the first place then, you know?
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, yeah, we're talking there's certainly like a class issue. It's not just a race issue. And like race also has a lot to do with those,
yeah.
those issues have a lot can't really be just spoken about in one dimension. You have to consider class as well.
Hmm.
Because like, our mayor, our mayor is a black man, you know what I mean? Like Eric Adams is a New Yorker, is a black New Yorker or whatever, but like that dude is not the guy. Like that dude is like not anyone's friend.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like rappers are meeting with him on some like get cool with him type shit, but it's fucking fraudulent. Like it's whack. Like he's a fucking cop. Like, and there's no reforming that. You know what I'm saying? There's only one way out of that shit. There's only one way to change that shit. It ain't reforming a system that's gonna be, you know, that's, you can't put a bandage on the cancer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like, again, you know, like there's this thing of like, oh, like the subways are homelessness and blah blah blah, people with mental health issues, why don't you just get them out? Like, no, like you can't come here and talk about clearing people out. Like that's no, that's a non-cipher. Like that's not gonna be the conversation we're having. You know what I'm saying? Uh,
Yeah.
you can't talk about, you can't come here, even as a New Yorker, you can't talk about, oh, well, they're gonna build jails and psych wards or whatever. So like the neighborhood quality of life is gonna go down or whatever. Oh, they're letting people back out on the street because of bail reform or whatever. I'm just like that type shit. That's the most like conservative,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, like this, a lot of and that was from like a Chinese, I believe it's Chinese, vlogger who ended up leaving New York because of that. That was his like final like goodbye to New York video. It's talking about like complaining about like, you know, homelessness and crime, and like crime always been a thing, but like it's not just that it's here. It's like if crime has gone up during the pandemic and whatnot because like the whole country was fucked up. The whole
Yeah.
economy was fucked up. Mad people lost work. So it's not like, the only thing is like we could see more of the results of that because of the technology we have in our hands.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing. It's not like the subway is more dangerous than it ever was. I've seen crazy shit on the subway all my fucking life. Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, what do you expect? You know what I mean? Like, what do you expect when you have like a system that's like any public transportation where it's just like anyone, like some people live on the subway. So it's like
Yeah.
you're in their house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could do, they feel like they could do whatever they need to do. So it's like you can't be surprised by that necessarily, or you can't be surprised to the point of like, you know, you could be like surprised and you could even be upset in certain ways, but like you can't try to just like, you know, you can't police that. You can't put a certain violence, exercise violence toward that because you don't agree with it, or because like, fam, you just move to another car. Like that's what we all do. If some shit's going crazy, you either move to another car, or you interject.
Yeah, I mean, like the real solutions there aren't about that. Those are like those are symptoms. Whether you like them or not is up to you, as you said. But like, it's about the fact, why are there people homeless? It's not because they chose that. You know, it's like it's
Exactly, right.
like if
Right.
you're
No one
complaining, you're like, man, there's so many homeless people. We gotta improve our social safety net. If that's what you're saying, then that could be a conversation versus just
Mhm.
like putting them in all these jails.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and for you, like as a New Yorker, I can tell like the appreciation you have for your people and the city, even withstanding all these other issues that a lot of you face. Like for you, what is it about New York that you love that keeps you there?
I mean, it's a city that like kept me safe in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, if I was in the suburbs or whatever, like I'd be probably bored and I'd probably have done mad drugs or whatever. Like, I don't want to just put it like that, but like that's a very, very like realistic path for a realistic, that's a very like natural path almost for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people. I feel like for me as a New Yorker looking on the outside or whatever, and like I see like what goes, as someone who like has gone out of town on so-called business and things of that nature, like I'd see how these small towns work, and like that shit is bugged out. Like, you know, living out of state, living upstate, like mad people like left New York to like move upstate, and it's just like, fam, like that shit is crazy up there. Like in meaning like crazy as in like this shit is backwards. Like this shit is fucking like it's Trump country over here. Most places, to be honest. Like that shit is
Yeah.
land and Trump country. Like the fucking, you know what I mean? There's so many flags being flown or whatever. Like what like that's not safe. That's way, like I feel way less safe around all that shit, around all that fucking national pride and whatnot than like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, just being on the subway. You know what I mean? Like I feel way safer on the train than like being around all these lawns with fucking American flags or whatnot. You know, real shit. So it's like, to me, like this is the place that, this is where I learned how to move. This is where I made all my moves. This is where, you know, it's like, you know, I don't want to like idealize anything, but like at the same time, like this is like what I know. You know what I mean? Like this is that. So for me, There's a spirit, there's like a certain spirit New Yorkers have, especially, or people who like really stay here and are like committed. You know what I mean? They're like, nah, like they really, it's not just about like, it's really about like sinking your teeth into the shit and like being like, nah, like, there's a fight. There's a fight there. Like you do have to fight and like understand, like, not every day is going to be this like so-called walk in the park, and that's just part of what it is. Like you learn how to bob and weave, you know what I mean? And there's just wild culture here. Like that's why you get so much of this interesting, like so much of this like unique nuance when with how people speak and address each other, with how music is being made and takes from X, Y, and Z. That's why sampling and DJing and whatnot became what it has become, because like it spent time in this like place where like there's people from all over bringing their influences, bringing their lineage. You know what I'm saying? So it's like everyone's digging in their elders, cabinets and bags and whatnot, and bringing whatever they find out of that to the table to then tool up and move forward with. So it's like that shit is just, it's always like up bustling. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I think as someone definitely who lived like I grew up in suburban Ottawa, which is Canadian suburbs, which is a different thing than the US suburbs, but
Sure.
just that idea of I found moving even to Toronto here, the bigger city, it's I feel like the thing I definitely have noticed, and it's something I'm trying to kind of unlearn or just kind of myself be better in, is that I guess generally the way you said like good neighbor, but just being less individualistic, like
Yeah.
having that sense of community is something that just really doesn't exist if you're like just naturally logistically, if you're like in these separated houses versus like a condensed area, like lots of places in a big city in New York, for example, like it's just by definition just you're less close, you're more individualistic. That sense of like collective action and kind of brushing shoulders with people, saying hi, like just like being normal like in public like that is just not something that I grew up really experiencing much. And that's also kind of why like I feel like when people, going back to the previous conversation, like I feel like people love the melting pot of New York for all the like all the shit that you can like consume as like the art, the
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
the all that
Definitely.
stuff. But
Right.
then they don't like anything that's naturally may come with it, you know?
Right. Right. I mean, that thing that you said about like the individualistic versus the collective, right? Or like, saying like literally like saying hi to your neighbors. Like the difference for me is like I thrive off of that. Like I need to be in a building where I like can say peace to people who might not even speak my language or speak English, so to speak, not my
Hmm.
language, but speak English as a first language. You know what I'm saying? But we're still like being gracious toward each other to a certain degree, because there's like a respect there or whatever. It's like, yo, we're all going to be out here doing our day. You know what I mean? Like we're all going to we're living in the same walls or around, in the same like structure, bricked up structure with each other. We're all dealing with the super, you know, hot ass heat on certain days. The cold, when the hot water gets shut off, like we're all dealing with that. You know what I mean? So we're in this shit together, right? Versus like when I go upstate or whatever, if I were to go upstate or go somewhere else and spend time where it's more so-called green or whatever, right? Sometimes you be at an Airbnb, you step out and like the neighbor across from you or next to you, like they're coming out, you kind of like meet eyes, and then they say hi, and you're like hi, eh. Like I don't feel comfortable like I do when I say hi to someone who's on my block.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when I first came to this neighborhood, like I had words with the kid who was pitching down the block because he did something stupid, and I like addressed him on that. And I'm like, yo, fam, like the fuck was that about? You know what I'm saying? Like da da da. Like that's just me though, personally. Like I'm not saying you should do this and whatever, but that's just how I was raised. And me as a 40, I think at that time I was 40, maybe 41. You know what I'm saying? I'm 41 now, but like me as a 40-year-old or whatever, like I'm not accepting that from, you know what I'm saying? So like I took something that could have been disrespectful, and I was just like question I approached him on that.
Hmm.
he was just like, yo, what? Da, da, da. And like we had a quick word, but it wasn't anything crazy. And then the next, like within a few days, I see him and he comes up to me. He's like, yo, bro, like my bad, G. Like I was like, I'd smoked too much. I didn't know what I was doing. Da da da. Like dapped it up, exchanged numbers. Like, yo, we ever need tree? Da da da. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was cool. And the same shit with like when I was coming up, like my neighbor across the street. I fought with this kid. Like I beat him till he's bloody when I was a kid, though. Like I was a kid and like we had, you know what I'm saying? Like playground fight, a
Mm-hmm.
fight across outside of the bus stop. You know what I'm saying? He tried to get some kids. You know, he got a bigger kid to like bully me, but it wasn't like a fight. He was just like made fun of me and I like was crying and shit. You know what I mean? I had like some ring on. It's like, oh, that's, you know, you're wearing your mom's ring, you know, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
just stupid shit. You know, we're like 8, 7, you know what I'm saying? I see that kid around. It was like, it was fine after that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, it's just different. Like you can like throw hands or just have words with somebody, but at the end of the day, sometimes like, you know, then you could just maybe reach a different understanding with them and form some sort of a, you know, there's an understanding formed out of that. Like maybe there's a mutual respect. I'm not gonna say in every situation because
Yeah.
sometimes it turns to beef and that shit can be fatal, literally, you know what I mean? Unfortunately. So there is that reality as well, but we're also competing with that idea. Like we're also like thinking about that in the back of our head sometimes. Some of us, some of us aren't, and that's oftentimes the issue. I don't feel that like when I go upstate, like because they don't know that. I'm assuming that most of the folks upstate, especially the white folks upstate who are like saying hi to me, I'm just like, okay, like you're saying that just because like you're putting on a like a you know putting on like a you're putting on airs.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this on some like weird respectability politics or whatever. Like you're doing this because like you're trying to be nice and shit. But like I don't trust you. I don't know you. You're not operating. You like there can't be that understanding because you're not from that. At least you haven't proven that to me. And my assumption of most folks upstate, most folks in the suburbs, especially white folks, I don't trust them off top. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like there's more reason not to trust you than there is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean, like
Yeah.
it's just like okay, but you know, we could talk and like figure out. But at the end of the day, like it's a different communication by nature. So
Mm-hmm.
like that relationship is just so different, but it's nuanced and it's like it's not something that just like you can carry back and forth and like apply blanket wise to the whole thing. Like New York City is different. Any city like inner city situation or whatever is different.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's why they call it inner city. Like it can feel like you're like in a tube with these with other
Mm-hmm.
folks. You know what I mean? But you
Yeah.
know, I'm trying to like we're literally like a lot of us are just trying to fucking go on with our day and not be stressed, like reduce the stress in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say about please leave is that I doubt you obviously didn't do this on purpose, but it's really eerie in like the creepiest way that the voices and like the tone and the speech speed just sounds like Ben Shapiro. All of them sound like Ben Shapiro. Like, and I believe it. And like some of them, I wouldn't be surprised if it was just like the content of what the fuck these people are saying. It's just like, and no, it's on, don't it's on. I'm like, oh my God. I literally first was like, is this Ben Shapiro? I'm like, no, it's not. Some of these are definitely not him. I'm like, I just, that was fucked up, but it was a stroke of genius, even though I don't think that was on purpose.
Word.
it drew
I
an
mean,
extra layer to it.
yeah, extra layer. I mean, that's. I mean, thank you. That's. But I did the point of that was indeed to like rouse up this feeling of like maybe anxiety or just whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that's what that environment is like.
Hmm.
Um, you know, it is that thing of like, all right, not only is the texture, the pitch, some of
Hmm.
the voices like higher and whatnot, they're sped up. It's like this frantic motion, kind of like this pull and push and
Yeah.
pull situation. So like, yeah, I mean, yeah, if you get Ben Shapiro, I think you're on point. That
Yeah.
you know, I wasn't thinking Ben Shapiro, but I definitely was thinking that type energy or channeling, signaling toward that type energy.
Oh
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I mean?
And so you're obviously like a very studied in the world of sampling. You have a class on sampling lineage. So I expect you have an opinion on this following topic, and it's something interesting because I don't believe you actually had the chance to respond, but this is kind of like an unofficial patron submission. But the patron army goes hard, so we're just like going hard even when I'm not asking. This is like 3 weeks ago before we even set this up. This is from Rhino. He asked, basically, given the context of you working with Algiers in this way, where they gave you the stems and kind of like full reins to just use all the stems for this upcoming record. He's wondering, given the fact that there's these increasing legal barriers to sampling, making it harder for maybe conventional sampling to work. Like, do you feel what you did with Algiers represents a potential like new frontier or like slash like viable alternative for sampling where you could just make connections with an artist and just give them permission to use your catalog like that?
Sure, sure. I not that wasn't the intent, I don't think. Not definitely not like priority
Yeah,
as
yeah,
far,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, wasn't in the front of my mind, but I could see it being looked at as such, and I could see it being an example of such, I guess, because I mean the point was to show a different version. I think our conversations always alluded to honoring this sort of richness behind the collaborative action. Like a collaboration doesn't just need to be us in the studio talking to each other and planning something out in terms of like, going over a track together,
Hmm.
being like, hey, I'll play the drums over here. Okay, yeah. Oh, give me some more bass over here. Like it wasn't that at all. Like they left me to my devices. Like I would be like blipped off the radar until I came back and was like, here, like if you read the Bandcamp conversation, Bandcamp daily feature, whatever, I think Ryan was the one who said it. Like they hadn't even heard Shook World until it
Yeah, until it
was
was like done,
when it was
right?
done.
Yeah.
Right. And that was
Crazy.
intentional too, because I don't want to give you just here's some. I gave him little previews on like really more so like on the phone, just like like little snippet, like just like IG story or
Yeah.
something. But like as far as the sequence and how that all played out, no, I think with the the intent was to show that collaboration can happen through simply conversation and friendship outside of the studio. And it's like, okay, well, now we could trade sounds, and there's a trust there before we even get to making the music. Therefore, the music itself is built on that. The music is built on this like relationship that spans beyond the studio, beyond the transaction of making music together in like the most like whatever one-dimensional optical kind of way. You know what I'm saying? Like, because a lot of people be like, oh, like let me I'm selling beats today. They buy a beat.
Hmm.
You don't know what the fuck happens to that beat. You don't know, you're not involved in the process, and you see the shit pop up on the latest album on whatever label or whatever artist, Bandcamp or whatever, or mixtape. You know what I'm saying? And like that always felt mad icky to me. You know what I'm saying? Like I always felt like I don't want to do that, because like that doesn't honor my place in the process.
Hmm.
And like wouldn't we create something more sumptuous and rich, if we were at it together, at least in conversation? But you want to dead all that, and that's the industry in it. Because it's like, okay, just make. That's, and once again, accelerated environment. Like we're time, right? Like it's like, oh, we just gotta
Interesting.
make more, make more, make more, make more. People, to the point where like people are making tapes based on, albums off of like taking shit off of like free beat websites or type beats on YouTube and shit like that.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying, at this point, right? So this is the opposite of that, where it's just like, nah, like we don't need to do that. Like we know and trust each other here. Just like have like, here's some sounds. Do what you will with it. And it's just like, all right, cool. Sure, that's a viable alternative to like sampling, but also like I'm the most renegade about all that shit. I mean, like there's one song on there that's like a pretty clear like
Yeah.
sample.
Yeah. I mean, I know the one.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
shout out to my centennial, my beloved centennial gardener, Dream Crusher, you know what I mean? But like that shit is a straight up, and that was purposefully like done. Like that was completely intentional. Like, nah, like we're jacking your beat.
Hmm.
and gonna flip it crazier and gonna do what we do with it. You know, it's definitely like altered. It's not, but that was also an allusion to like the so-called mixtape freestyle, as was the Big Just joint, because Big Just is on the intro to An Unknown Infinite. You know what I'm saying? So there's that callback to that.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh, like you know, I'm one for reusing beats. I love sample drill because it's just like whatever, we'll sample whatever and rhyme over, you know what I'm saying? Make some fly shit out of anything. Like, you know, fucking Foo Fighters or Sia or whoever the fuck. Like, you know, we'll
Hmm.
sample a Neptune's beat with Super Thug or whatever. It's just like cool. Like I love that. I love that too. You know what I'm saying? So like I'm really very much a renegade about the shit. Like I don't care. Like they can come try to find us type shit. It's never gonna work at the end of the day. Like it's not, you know, the AI shit is interesting, but like there's still ways around that, I believe. Maybe need to get some hackers on the team and you know
Hmm.
blow up some computers and shit. But like at the end of the day, like I'm here to like sample anything and everything. Not, but there's always
Time and
there's
place.
always
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's context to all that as well. But I'm here to definitely like sample shit and not be clearing shit, because most of the time you're not clearing it with the actual artist who
Yeah.
played or created that thing. Especially if you're not of this like certain percentile. You know, if you're Solange or you know you're part of the Knowles dynasty, or you're Kanye or you're Drake or whoever, like you should be clearing everything.
Yeah.
If you have a music, you know, industry backing, machine backing you, like absolutely. But if you're us, like, you know, we try to just make music, try and make some ill shit. And kind of bend and hack as much as we can possibly do. So that's where I'm at with it. I can't speak
Hmm.
for everyone else, but that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like the samples and all with the sounds that you put together just created such a thick world with Shook World that I love. Like, and I particularly like how it definitely speaks to that mixtape culture, but it's so cohesive. Like it really is uniquely wild and kind of diverse. And I love that way that you said before about how like the songs just kind of like disintegrate into something else. Like, and a lot of times I find myself just being like, yo, what song is this? Like I'm trying, because especially I'm trying to prepare for this. If I like to know the track title so I can maybe speak to an individual one like here or there. And I'm just like, I sometimes I still don't really know the track names, which is very odd given how much I've actually listened to this album, which kind of like which is a good thing I think. But
Word.
so like musically speaking, like particularly the like just the overall general sound of this thing, like how as soon as you kind of got the stems from Algiers, like did you have a general idea of what you wanted this thing to sound like, or did you just start creating individual songs and then it started to piece itself together pretty naturally and you just built off that?
I I think I had an idea, and then things started to just kind of come together as I started to work with things. You know, none of it was based in a soul, none of it was based on anything singular, so to speak. So it wasn't like I was just all I was doing was working on Algiers. Like the first so-called beat packs that I was sending out were my own beats that I'd like not put out yet.
Hmm.
So shit from my archive, but you see it referenced in the writing on the album. Like it's like so like Fangs with Desday, Swing, Nakama, a couple other joints. Obviously,
Yeah, those are older ones, right?
yeah, those are
That's
joints
what I
that
found surprising about. Like, I thought a lot of this felt like it was all in the same session.
mm,
That's what it
mm.
felt like, which is a good thing. But
Well, I'll say this. You could do a lot when you have agency over your stuff and you're making it, you know, you're mixing, like I mixed and mastered it. I recorded all of it, and the recording, the most of the production, and you know, the sequencing, the majority of the sequencing and mixing took place in a month, in that
wow.
December November 3rd to December 3rd time period. Like literally most of that. The rest of it was like, you know, very much like getting into the deep, you know, the so-called like the details and even the problem areas. Like a couple of things were like, oh damn, like I really had to rack my brain on certain just engineering
Hmm.
whispery shit. So I learned a lot doing this in a very little time. But yeah, like, you know, I recorded a lot of folks in 1 week, in like 1 week. Like the first week of sessions was like close to 10 people.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And most of them were done by me. Only people and or maybe like, you know, like Big Just doesn't live here, so he sent something in. But obviously I mixed it and like affected it and mastered it and da da da. So Disfig, Rena, who does the Showtime part at the end of Stand on It. But yeah, Nakama recorded mad shit with me. Amani and Masai recorded the same day. Desday. Elucid also actually was not. This is the first time we did not record with each other.
Mm.
And that was a whole thing too. He recorded on a different beat. So I was just like,
Wow.
oh shit. And like literally I was like, oh damn. All right. So I gotta remake this. He you know, he had a family thing that was going on and he was just really busy. So I was like, all right, nah, don't worry about it. I got you. I'm gonna do a little magic. And I basically made that beat. I had a different version of that beat. Irreversible Devil is what it's called.
Yeah.
And I just kind of retooled it around his verses and the tempo of his verses. It was like it's like a 2 BPM difference. Wasn't too crazy. So it was cool. Like he knows how to like bounce out his vocal stems, so it's easy. So I can like deal with all that. Nothing was off beat, put it like that. I didn't have to like do any weird like sleight of hand. But it was, yeah, then that led to something I liked even more than the first beat. Like the original version of that. I was like, oh, using those like little snaps. I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, like, yeah, like DJ Mustard snaps. Cool. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm just like, fuck it. Like, you know, I call it DJ. I'm just probably from a DJ Mustard sample pack, but that I had, which is
Okay.
now another illusion. Like, once again, like we're talking about like alluding to like the technology and like the sort of like the culture of like production and you know reuse
Mm-hmm.
and you know what I'm saying like alluding to certain things like almost like tropes like okay like that's like a very that's a very Ron Browse kind of moment. That's a very, I mean, well, there's literally Ron Browse's
Yeah.
again. Like I didn't clear that. But I
Yeah.
was like, oh, it'd be great. Like I was like, oh, jumping out the window. That's like chaotic as fuck. Like I was like,
Yeah.
yo, if I drone Ron Browse auto tune,
No, that
like
shit,
what?
when that first listen, that song, probably that and Good Money. I think Good Money generally just fucking always makes me go crazy. But those two
Or
songs, I was just like, what is going on, man? This is crazy.
it's yeah, and it's during
Yeah.
like the fucking like mayhem that's starting to happen in all like the dialogue or like all the
Mm-hmm.
found sound and the sample, the dial, shit from videos on YouTube and whatnot. So yeah, it was that all kind of came together naturally too. Like that whole process of like stitching things together, like shit was just talking to each other. Like the Jean Grey sample I just randomly had, and I had used that years ago in a mix. And I'm like, yo, that shit. Let me put that back in because it's so fly. Like what she says, it's so ill. And I was just like, boom. And then right after she's done speaking, Dream Crusher comes in. Their first word is time, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, no, this should be happening more than I can really tell you, fam. Like it really, and I just take it for what it is. I'm like, all right, that was yep, sure. Look, I'm with you. Let's go. You know what I mean? So I don't want to question the flow. I just go with it. You know what I'm saying? So I really wanted to, and yo, I always wanted to do a Doom drone kind of like slow guitar heavy ass moment, and I was like, I'm gonna do it on this album. Fuck it. So that's where it goes from Good Money to Please Leave. Good Money was made when I was sequencing it. I'm like, yo, I want to kind of continue this energy off of Stand on It because Stand on It has that last part where it speeds up and
Mm-hmm.
it goes into that Showtime, that
Yeah.
no music. That's that shit that that's an era. It's a certain thing in New York, right? So it's like going from that and Rena doing the Showtime MC shit. And then I was like, yo, let me just continue it. And so I never made a beat like that. I was like, yo, I always wanted to though. I had a
That
couple
shit.
sessions back in like the 2000s that like I just never like finished those beats and shit. I was like,
Yeah.
we do this again. So I just did a shit. And I was like, oh yeah, all right.
Yeah.
And if you listen, this is for y'all, little tidbit, technical side of things, like really opening the trunk. If you listen, it's two. I have the samples. I have an Algiers saxophone. I have the UFO joint that everyone knows, hopefully. and and then I have on one ear, I have one light feet, like one Showtime recording happening. And on the other ear, I have another Showtime, a different Showtime performance happening. And then at the very end, they kind of meet in the middle with all the applause and
Yeah.
celebration and whatnot. So like again, I wanted to make this like a deep listening experience if you're there for that. Like you put on the headphones or you're in a good sonic environment where the stereo field is clear, you'll be able to hear like, oh, that's coming. Oh shit, that's coming over on the left side. Like, oh damn, all right. So yeah, I was just like, I want to make it fuller. And I'm like, yo, fuck it. Like instead of just having shit coming at the end, like let me just I mean, beat match it, have the shit happen through the whole joint. And I was like, oh, this is kind of crazy. One's like a Bobby Shmurda like Light Feet remix, and then the other joint, I don't even know what it is, but this shit is hard. I was like, okay, it's cool, like little crowd effects jumping in and out. Like I love voices, as you
Hmm.
can tell. So
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them on here, and
yeah, in
like,
general,
yeah,
all my work, really, I love the rhythm. Everything is a rhythm. Like every voice, the way people speak, that dialogue, etc. Like there's a rhythm in all that. So I like to key in on that.
yeah, and I really appreciated like how on this album with the collaborations, like you were able to put a ton of different voices into a spot that worked, and that like, and given the variety of voices here, like I didn't initially, if I would have heard some of these songs and then just looked at the rest of the track list, I'd be confused. Like for example, one is Lord Queso. Fucking love that last album he made, More Chores, amazing. Um, but some of these songs, I'm like, this doesn't really feel like something I've heard on him. Like, I'm sure he would rock it for sure, but I just didn't think it was a natural fit necessarily. But then the beat you gave him for media training had that like groove and it like, I was like, how did this manage to fit so tidily in this just really dense album? But yeah, like, so speaking of the collaboration here, like a lot of them are from New York, so that's a commonality there for sure. But how would you characterize just generally the type of collaborator you were wanting to pull into Shook World?
You got it right there. New Yorkers of varying degrees. So folks who are so-called native New Yorkers or people who were born here and grew up here, and then folks who I see as New Yorkers, as fellow New Yorkers, because of how they move and how they've been moving here. So, Martina Roberts, I asked her, I'm like, yo, do you consider yourself a New Yorker? And she was like, yeah, I think so. Like I got a couple things that, that like, whatever,
Hmm.
couple bills that still have my New York address on it or whatever, whatever.
Nice.
And I was just like, hell yeah. I'm like, word. I mean, truth be told, like you definitely were around during like a really special time too. And whenever she's around, it's special. But like, as far as like the greater cultural music and expressive movements, she was in that shit. So like, yeah, and just how she moves, she's been someone I've learned a lot from. So yeah, Haram is Jersey all day, and then Philly really, I'd say secondary, but like the way Haram moves certainly is to me like very much like, nah, like you're at home here, you know what I mean? And like you have a home here, you know what I mean? You're welcome here type shit. And not just for me to say, but you know what I mean? Like I welcome Haram with open arms here. I mean we share a studio. So
Oh.
we were in the studio, we were in our studio doing that
Hmm.
shit together. That's her first vocal feature, which is wild. I didn't even know that. I was like, oh, what? Um, so yeah, just people who I see as like just showing the varying degrees of New Yorkers too. Like Dream Crushers from Wichita, Kansas. You know what I'm saying? But they've been here for since 2014, I say.
Hmm.
So almost 10 years. And they've been they've done a whole lot and a whole lot of living and you know what I mean? So yeah, there's New Yorkers. They would be like, I'm not, but like I'm like you got the honorary from me at least. You got the
Yeah.
little so and to this yeah, I don't know. I to the sequencing like the media training thing, I just wanted to like you said I mean thank you for saying that. like having that mixture of folks too, which is mad fun. Like just mix
Right.
the
Yeah.
same thing as like throwing in that like a good money and then following that up with like some doom drone situation, but then also throwing Marcus on the cuts, Mr. Pin on the
Mm.
cuts on that. And I wanted a turntablism. I almost got on the decks myself. I was like, need to make my. I wanted originally to my next album to have me. I wanted to like have that be part of the Sonics,
Yeah.
like me being on a turntable and like really getting funky back on my old instrument. But it just wasn't. I was just like, fuck it. I gotta ask Marcus. Marcus is dead nice,
Yeah.
and we be talking about, we have a lot of the same heroes in terms of that. So like, I was like, yo, what a turntablism moment over like some shit that sounds like Boris or like Sun. Are you crazy? Like hell yeah, like I'm here for that. So like I'm at that party, but then I'm also, I'm at the Showtime party, and then throwing in Queso, throwing in Masai over like this sludge reverse twisted worming thing, this like heaping this behemoth. Um, like all of that, throwing that all together, having Big Just over like a soul, kind of like a soul loop. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like just I'm here for the twists, the
Yeah,
plot
the
twists.
juxtapositions, yeah. Yeah, and I
And
love
make it
just the diversity of the voices and the quality of the voices first and foremost. Like
mm,
I think for a lot of people, myself included, this is the album that I was aware of Nakama. I had heard maybe a project, I don't know, maybe last year, and I was like liked it but didn't really check for it again. Then I heard him on these two joints, specifically Swing, and that's probably my favorite song on the whole album, and I'm just like
word.
definitely the beat that's a crazy beat, but I was
Thank
like,
you.
damn, this blew me away. And I feel like a lot of people I follow and I'm like talk to about rap and stuff like that, they were Nakama really was one of the showstoppers of this record, and I ever since then I've gone into their stuff and hella impressed.
Yeah, no, that was intentional too, having Nakama and having Desde on twice. Whereas like most people, Dream Crusher's on two joints, but
Yeah.
say like one of them is shorter than the other, I guess. Having Nakama and Desde both, showing up twice was absolutely intentional, and I just wanted to give them some time to shine. Again, like just like a mixtape, like sometimes, you have like when K Slay was putting out Papoose, there'd be extra Papoose songs on the
Mm.
tapes, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, well, yeah, we have a stockade of them, and like you're my people's, like, of course I'm gonna put you on. Like that would be in everyone's best interest or whatever. But yeah,
Mm.
people know me. I have a whole album of the money. Every album I've done, well, not every, but every album I've done with like voices or whatever, Messiah's been a part of, you know what I'm saying? Like XYZ, Elucid, the same thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like Nakama and I have mad shit. Desde and I have some shit in the stock. Oh my gosh. So it's like kind of like opening the curtain a little bit more. You know what I mean? And just being like, yo,
Mm-hmm.
also just like, come on, man. Like there's super wizards. Like, y'all need to know these folks. So that's that.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think that's also, yeah, I think this is people just good should just go check out if you're not aware of any of these names, whether it's the rappers, the like anybody who's featured in these track lists, Martina Roberts, like that was one name where I saw it and I'm like, I did not know you guys, like I'm not that familiar with her with them that much, and I was just like, that's a really, because I've heard some records from Martina like years ago before I even heard of you. So I was like, this is just a cool ass connection, and that kind of thing is just really nice to see. And speaking of some of these records you got upcoming, I kind of want to give you some time before we wrap up. Just like you said, Des Day, like work coming up. Anything that you want to shout out, that you'd want to mention here?
Word. Yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a couple of things I'm working on engineer wise right now that will be coming out either on PCP or just in this year. So I'm really excited about those things because it is that collaboration of like shaping the sound from start to finish, whether or not I did the production. One of them is yeah, I don't really, but one of them, if you go to the Shook World versus Shook or Shook versus Shook World YouTube video that Hate Six has put up recently, some really nice footage of that night on 12/15 on December 15th. Um there's a preview of a couple songs, matter of fact, that are yet to be released. So you could
Nice.
hear them in soundboard recording quality. And all that gives you a hint as to like what's kind of coming in the future. But definitely, you know, yeah. Made an allusion to Unknown Infinite 2. That was a joke. We would not make an Unknown Infinite 2.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly more stuff with Amani, certainly more stuff with the people that you see on here. Yeah, definitely some shit with Nakama, definitely some shit with Desday, and hopefully that Elucid KVU album will drop. We're saying this year, we're saying later this year.
Mm-hmm.
So feels right, feels right. And then I'm just like producing or mixing and mastering a couple things that very much vary in sound too. There's a couple it's like maybe another like black metal record. And I don't know, I got the itch. Honestly, I got the itch to start working on some new shit, but that's not gonna come out this year, I don't think. Like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like y'all need to sit with Shook World for a while. And like I want that to be an album that people like live with. Just like anything else that we've done. Yeah, I do have an itch, and it's not gonna be like Shook World. So that can happen. Just live over here, live elsewhere. So yeah, I'm not, I don't like doing the same move twice, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
just stay in tune with PTP. Shit, there's plenty happening. Come to a show, come say hi. If you're in New York, you know what I mean? We have a market happening in April. And I'll be doing more classes. I'll be probably doing one more iteration, or cohort of the Found Sound Sampling History and Sonic Lineage class in summer. So for those folks who are in school currently, who are like, I really don't, I'm not trying to juggle more, they can come through for that. And then I'm going to be doing some rap linguistics, starting on that joint. So yeah, I'm just going to still be teaching and making sounds sound. The sounds will be sounding.
Keep sounding, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Love
Yo,
this album, and I love the energy and the spirit that you bring to the game right now. I think it's super important. Like, it's very authentic and genuine. Always good vibes.
appreciate you, Rohan. Yeah, no, thank you for taking the time to talk this shit with me and research shit and like do some really solid fucking work and solid question asking. I really enjoyed this. And yeah, yo, shout out to you in the podcast too. You know what I mean? Child actor joint was this, yeah, Feek and Lungs,
Yeah,
peoples, you
a
know what I
lot of
mean?
fun
So
ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad people are like, folks like you are giving these lovely folks some more shine to like have other folks understand and tap in more. So yeah, yo, shouts to folks, shouts to you, rap plug, and rap music plug. And yeah, fam, like I'll be here whenever.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Perfect. Thank you so much, man. Take care.
Yes, sir. Peace, family.
Peace. So there we have it, another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some new perspectives and insights into what the greatest art form known to man in hip-hop music has to offer. If you want to support the show in the most meaningful way possible, it would be my absolute honor to have you as a patron in the new Rap Music Plug podcast Patreon. Through this Patreon, you will be getting exclusive content such as bonus episodes, exclusive album recommendations, exclusive playlists, early access to episodes, and more. And above all, though, you will be able to support the show directly in a way that will not only justify the crazy amount of time I spend on this show already, but allow me to cover some of the expenses related to supporting all of these great artists that we cover on the show through the website, and will allow us to sustain and build on this amazing growth that the RMPP has experienced recently. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.